Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode of the Road to the Master series. This is the episode number 56 in which I will cover the analysis of the round number 5 of Kielce Chess Open, in which I finally got white pieces, this time though against a lower rated opponent, and not only that, against a guy that I played against for many years. Recently, I started when he was like 17 or 1800 rated junior player. As of now, he is an, let's say, adult with a CM title, same as myself. So by no means I was a better player in here, even though rating might indicate just that. So I was prepared for a long fight. I'm not sure if you remember, but actually against Timek I've played a game that I've covered on this channel already. It was one of the first episodes of the Road to the Master series. So if you remember that, kudos to you. But yeah, 1 year at his age means a lot. As you can tell, he climbed a lot with the rating, with the skills too. So I was prepared for a long battle. Let's see how it went. I opened with e4 expecting e5, and I went for the Rui Lopez, same stuff as we've played 1 year ago when I won rather comfortably. I was not hoping for let's say a repeat of such circumstances and such a win, but I wanted to check Rui Lopez yet again. This time Timek went for the main line, so a6, knight f6, bishop e7, b5 and castle. When black castles before playing with the d pawn to d6, it means that he's preparing some martial attack, and as the anti-martial goes, I believe there are two main options. One is a4, one is a3, and this time I decided to go with the former, so a4, after which b4 was played. And I knew that as an attempt to, let's say, get a advantage from the opening, I should be playing a move like d4, but I did not check it before the game, and I felt like my opponent might did that because, well, he was playing rather fast, and on top of that, the position the game would be rather dynamic, forced, exchanges, this and that. So if he knows the variation, I have nowhere, let's say, to surprise him there. So instead I decided to go with the standard, let's say, calmer approach of d3 move. I knew that straight away I am kind of giving up on the advantage out of the opening, but I wanted to play a game of chess, simply. My opponent went with rook b8, one of the few moves that black can choose. In my notes, let's say d6 is the main move, and in the opening book too, and I kind of, let's say, forgot why in the world would he play a move like this, because it in itself it does not accomplish much, but the point is that he is willing to delay the d6 pawn push, so that after my knight to d2, bishop c5 is the opportunity, so that he will not be facing bishop g5 consequences, because I have just blocked the bishop. And I didn't remember what was in my notes, let's say, after such move. Now I know that I just forgot about kind of a tricky move order and switch of places for my pieces, because since the d6 move is so much delayed, I can play bishop c4 move, funny enough, with the idea that after d6 is finally on the board supporting the pawn and preparing knight a5, I am just in time to play knight b3, covering the knight a5 move and also hitting the bishop, and after bishop a7, let's say, I can either try to expand on the queen side, or I can try to exchange the bishops, maybe stop bishop g4 from coming, like plenty of choices, normal game, but the main reason is that with this knight, knight a5 will not be on the board, my bishop feels kind of okay in here, so this would be the superior version of what I got in the game, because in the game I chose a3 move, yet another normal usual one, but just not the one that was in my notes, let's say. After a3, opponent chose finally d6, and I knew that I will not be able as of now on time to do any maneuver on the queen side, and since the knight a5 was a move that I want to avoid, I decided to play c3, creating some space for my bishop, so if now knight a5 would be on the board, I would drop back the bishop to c2. I'm never worried about such move because, well, apparently I can take, that's one reason, but even if I would include such move and then, let's say, something like this, I'm not that much worried about b3. Yes, this pawn might be a weakness, but my rook, well, it's not going anywhere yet, and my bishop later on might be able to come back into the game. After c3 then, I was rather okay with my position, and I expected some h6 move to be played, rook e8, bishop e6, all the normal stuff, but my opponent took on c3. I didn't feel like it's necessarily the best decision. It would be, I would say, in black interest to keep the pressure ongoing, but okay, he took, then played h6, and now I had a tough time deciding what to do next. I kind of didn't want to go with knight f1 because after bishop e6 the trade on e6 would be rather forced, and why is my knight going through f1 to e3 or g3 if this pawn is fighting against the knight. So instead of that I chose rook b1. There are some tricks like knight a5, then I have bishop f7 making use of this discovered attack, so the knight has to stay there to protect the rook, and I expected, since that is a little bit of a threat for the bishop e6 to be played out so that the rook is more and more protected, after which I wanted to take on e6. Now the idea is that my opponent cannot take on b1 as an intermediate move, because then I would make another one with h check, so obviously f e6 is forced, and after that I wanted to take, and play queen c2. All of the entry points for the black queen through the b file are taken, and I was not worried about that. And with that I felt okay, perhaps I still don't have any advantage whatsoever after the opening, but I resolved the issue, let's say, if you may say it was the issue of the light squared bishop that I didn't know what to do with, and we have a game. The one thing that was bothering me though was the fact that my opponent was playing rather quickly, and it's of no surprise. He prepared rook b8, bishop c5, d6 move order, after which it was me that had to figure out what to do, as his moves were rather easy and forced. So already as of now, if I remember correctly, I was down like 40 minutes on the clock. He was having like 1 hour 20 minutes, I had 40, so I knew I have to speed up a little bit, but thankfully the position is not such a dynamic one, so that I can spend some time on. In here my opponent chose queen e8, having an eye on this pawn, maybe having an eye on this diagonal inside of the board, so pretty useful move. I decided to play with knight to b3. As I've said before, this pawn makes those squares unusable for me, therefore knight f1 made little sense to me, so I decided to hit the bishop, and after it goes back, play bishop e3. I was expecting bishop a7, because then after bishop e3 exchange is rather a natural way of playing. After bishop b6 I played there anyway, yet again expecting the exchange, but my opponent went with knight h5 instead, and I believe that it's not the best course of action for him, because after I take on b6, the point is that if, for example, he exchanged, so combining this position to, let's include knight h5, so this one to this one, I would say that in the game, this pawn will be a weakness, this is a weakness, this is 2, this might be 2, so like plenty more potential weaknesses that my opponent may have, and in terms of my weaknesses, they will remain the same, this one and maybe this one. And in this variation, I mean, those are the two weaknesses in both camps, but it's much more harder for me to get to any of them, I would say. So maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not. The point is that I felt like, okay, it may have been not the most accurate way of playing from my opponent. One difference though is additionally that, I don't have the rook on the third rank, which I kind of want to have because it covers so many important squares. So I played there anyway. Knight f4 happened, king h2, queen h5, and now knight g1. I am covering everything with my pieces, nothing is hanging. For example, if I played something like, I don't know, queen d2 maybe, then there was a trick of knight takes h3, takes and takes, so I had to be careful about it. But as I've said, after knight g1 everything is more than fine, and attack of black kind of stopped there, so he has nowhere to do there, and he started going back with the pieces. So queen e8, knight h5, and so on. So at this point I felt, okay, my king is alright. This pawn chain is disrupted, as I've said before. I began with queen e2, hitting the knight, not allowing the queen to move yet. 97 was the reply from my opponent. As of now I played knight c1 because I knew that my opponent might attempt move like this. I just said that, okay, queen was supposed to be protecting the knight, and that is true. However, after rook f2, my king is not so great, so I played to c1, not to d2, so that the knight is not, let's say, hanging, and I felt like it's okay for me. Apparently, as you can tell, engine likes black in here, because after king h1, he has some obvious move like king h7, with the idea to reroute the knight, with the idea to, I don't know, bring the queen this way or the other, and apparently, even though I am a piece up, it's hard for me to do much in this position. So I did not see that coming, even though I saw the variation, I evaluated it not correctly. Perhaps it was the same for my opponent, who obviously did not take on a4. He played, let's say, normal knight c6 move, after which I played queen a2, protecting the pawn, hitting this one, which was the idea behind knight dropping back to c1 anyway. He played king h8, I developed back the knight, I brought the king back to the game, and after d5 we got the position in which yet again I felt like I am doing quite alright. I mean, maybe I don't have any advantage yet, but thanks to the fact that b6 pawn is hanging, I had the option to try to put some pressure to my opponent, because I started with queen b2, simply hitting the pawn, and after my opponent protected it, I decided, okay, now it's the time to go for it all. And we will reach the position from the thumbnail that you saw, because I, as of now, played d4. And funnily enough, I always say to my students, especially those lower rated ones, that putting the pawns like that does not have much in common with chess. But in here, obviously I had a clear idea in mind. I wanted to open up the position, hopefully create some problems for my opponent, but it's really not that easy. Why do I say that? Because at this point it's the move number 30, so it's 10 more moves until the time control, and I had 10 minutes in here before playing d4. And on the move d4 I've spent 7 minutes, so 70% of the time remaining for the next 10 moves of the game I spent on this one and only, meaning that the other 30% I would have to use on the next 9 moves. So if you think about the time management, it was not a good idea. I should even say more, it was a bad idea. However, I felt like I calculated everything. It will be not true, we will see that in a second. But the point is that I really wanted to go for it all. I was playing quite a complex game. Not so often in my lifetime I've played such a complex, let's say, close to Ruy Lopez variation. I was happy with how I constructed the middle game. My opponent played a great game so far too. I wanted to spice things up, even though it meant that I would take some risk. I wanted to take this risk, and it wasn't like, okay, let's do something because I was struggling all the game and I need to, go forward. No, it was more or less, let's say, an experienced decision. I know that it objectively will not be a good decision, but I want to try. I feel like this is the moment. I put the queen on b2, especially for that, so let's go. I played d4. As you can tell, Ivar bar dropped a lot, but thankfully I calculated that there is no blunders on the way, let's say. So the evaluation dropped by the engine only because of some strategical long-term problems that the d4 will create for me, but I was happy with that. I wanted to live with them. What are those? Well, d4 move weakens the c4 square, and that's exactly where my opponent's knight is heading to. Knight a5 with the threat of the fork. I had to go back to d2. Now my opponent takes on e4. I have to take back queen a8, very important move, trying to make use of the spin, this overload of the knight and so on. So I'm forced to play a move like f3, trying to stop the pin from being exploited, and also kind of, weakening my king. But I felt, okay, it seems odd, but should be fine. And now my opponent played queen c6. I would say natural move, bringing the queen a little bit closer to the game, having an eye on the a4 weakness, c3 weakness, c4 square and so on. But apparently, as you can tell, Ivar bar shows 0.00, so this is the exact reason why I wanted to play this d4, to have even more complex game and so on. I don't know really why ed4 should be better than queen c6, especially since after queen c6, knight d3 my opponent took anyway. So we got into such position in which, as you can tell, before d4 the position was rather closed, not much was going on. And in the position now, position is rather open. There are some possibilities along this semi-open file, this one too, maybe something on the king. The knight might have some outpost for me and for him, like plenty of stuff going on. I was ready for it, and it's move number 36, so 4 or 5 moves to go, and let's see how they went. My opponent now decided to simplify the game. It was not the correct decision, I would say, since this knight is blocked and unable to enter the game, and 95 is not that worrying at all. He should rather play rook c8, trying to take over the c file and create some play there. Instead, he went for knight c4, which allowed me to trade one of my worst pieces and also develop the other knight to f4, hitting the pawn, creating some fork threats, and so on. So I was more and more optimistic. And after rook c8, I had a decision to make. And the problem was that in here I was already like down to 1 single minute on the clock with 2 moves to play. And well, what are my choices? I can take the pawn with the knight, with the rook. I can give a check. I mean, I can maybe even play a move like g4 or h4. I don't know which one yet. Maybe I can try to just simply drop back the rook and wait with taking the pawn. So all the nuances between the moves, and depending on what do I want to accomplish in the game, my decision will differ a lot. Because for example, if I want to win, probably I have to keep the queens on the board. Therefore, move like h4, for example, would not be the best. So I decided that I would like to take on e6 so that opponent will not be willing to exchange queens because, well, he would be pawn down. So the question is which piece should take on e6, and I wanted to take with the knight so that, you know, in the near future I might create some play there. Rook e6 obviously would also be possible, but I was worried that after queen a4 I am losing the pawn advantage, and because of this threat I have to go back with the rook, and I'm kind of slower because I just made 2 moves with a rook. So yeah, I took with the knight, he took the pawn, yet again creating this this threat. But now with rook e2 on the board I have the knight on e6. Is it good or bad? I mean, it's debatable, but the point is that I had, let's say, a little bit more active pieces, and after queen c4, guys, we achieved the time control, so no longer time trouble for me. I could have spent as much time as I wanted. I mean, okay, not too much, but 15 minutes were added to my clock, so I had the time to figure out what to do. And I knew that even though, you know, I've played this d4, I risked a lot. There is not much going on for me yet. Materially speaking, we are equal. Dynamically speaking, yes, I have the active knight. Yes, I might have some threats there, and my passer might be an okay option for me to try to find a win. At the same time, though, it's not so clear because there are 2 passers, connected ones. So if my initiative dries down, opponent might take over it, right? So yeah, not easy decision in here to make. D5 was the tempting move, but after knight f6, knight covers the diagonal, makes the pressure to the pawn on d5 even bigger. Pushing it even further was kind of risky. After, let's say, queen d5, I'm hit both hit and there. So like it's not clear for me how can I, let's say, survive. Apparently I can obviously sacrifice on g7 and then try to go for something crazy like that with the vulnerable king and one less piece, but you know, it's computer stuff. So humanly speaking, it was not advised to push the pawn so far further, and for that reason I decided that I want to play h4 move that creates some space for the king if I will need it. And also, you know, I was having some dreams in my mind that I would be able to plant the knight on g6 and create some checkmate patterns with my pawn, knight and the rook if I will be ever able to get to the 8th rank. So I felt like h4 is a good choice. My opponent went with logical knight f6, stopping that. I went with knight f4, so as you can tell I went there, then I went back. So as I've said, it's debatable whether or not this knight takes e6 was important. And as of now, I felt like I might be taking over the initiative. You know, everything protects each other and like I am creating something. The only issue for me is how to activate the queen, but if I will resolve it, I should be taking over. My opponent though was, I guess, of a different opinion because he just simply started pushing the pawn. And it is somewhat similar to the situation from the round number 2, if you remember it, during which my opponent did not push the pawn to create counterplay, therefore allowed me to win the game with the queen advantage. In here, my opponent did that, so maybe it's a good approach, similarly as it was in the round number 2. The point is that I did not think so highly about this move, to be honest, but you know, black has to do something too. In here I was debating between two choices mostly. As you can tell, knight g6 might be tempting because after king g8 I have simple fork and I'm winning the material, and after king h7 now I might try to put the queen onto the diagonal. It's not working though yet because, well, queen was responsible for defending the rook, same as the knight, right? So if the knight goes, queen cannot. And that's why at this point I would struggle to find a move. Knight e5 was tempting because, you know, I'm running away with the knight with a tempo to the queen, with threat of checking and giving everything with this tempo check and so on. But now queen c1 was the move, you know, taking control of all the entry points for my queen on the long diagonal, suggesting a queen trade, activating the black queen. So it was not the best option for me in my eyes. And for that reason, I decided to change the move order and start with queen b1 so that I am now threatening with this, right? And if my opponent would like to, I don't know, play queen c1, then I have queen f5 that I didn't have time for in the other variation. And as you can tell, Ivar Bar starts to like my situation. So after queen b1, I felt like it should be more or less only a change in the move order, but also opponent has one more additional defensive resource of knight d5, attempt of, you know, exchanging the knights. And since the knight is the defender of the rook, I need to react properly, so obviously with a check. Since now the queen is on this diagonal, opponent goes to g8 and this knight protects the fork. And at this point I felt, okay, now I will play queen e1, trying to set up some pressure along the e-file. So if he, I don't know, pushes, I can give a check. And if he takes, well, I might be getting some discoveries here and there, maybe some checkmates and all that. So as you can tell, Ivar Bar says 0.00, but I am the one putting pressure. Opponent is the one that has to find the perpetual checks or anything of that kind. The point is that still I am the one pushing, even though Ivar Bar says it's 0.0. But as you can tell, Ivar Bar as of now does not show 0.00, so something went wrong. And what is it? Well, guys, I am not gonna lie, I did not see that move and motive completely. My opponent said afterwards that he was kind of looking at it from the distance and was hoping to get it on the board because I got crushed, I got surprised in here. My opponent played queen takes e2. And I'm like, wait, what? Apparently it's winning. Apparently it's winning because obviously I have to accept the sacrifice. And now rook c2. Second sacrifice in a row. I guess if I put up the review, it will show the two brilliances in a row. Like, what's going on? Well, as you can tell, let's say from this point onwards, what are my advantages? My advantages is somewhat, let's say, a little bit of the initiative over the opponent's king and not much going on aside from that. So either my initiative will be, you know, dangerous enough so that I will create something there, or my opponent might take over the game with this b5 pawn pushing or a pawn pushing, right? Those are the connected outside passers, one of the best things that you can have in the endgames. And the problem is that after queen e1 takes rook c2, if I take the rook, there is knight e3 check incoming, and now we have the endgame. Simply only with the knights, which, as you know, are not the fastest pieces on the board, with the two passers running away, and yeah, simply lost. So this struck me like surprisingly. I don't know if it was at this point, no, perhaps at this point. I was thinking for quite a long time, but okay, not thinking, using a lot of time because I was just in shock. Like, how could have I missed that? Like, why and so on. So I didn't calculate a lot. I was just, you know, in my own head punishing myself. And yeah, in here basically I have two options, either, as I've said, to take the rook and allow this endgame to occur on the board, or try to give a check and after this take, and only now try to bring the knight somewhere into the game. And with the knights, you never know, really, guys. Knights are so tricky that even though knight c6 and knight d5 are the moves to consider first, I like by a joke I felt like, okay, knight f5 will be the best move in here, and apparently objectively it is, even though it's still losing. I don't even know why is that, but I kind of felt that with some crazy calculations that I cannot even bring up, because at this point I know that I am lost. Is the question of, can I somehow swindle my opponent into some drawish endgame for some reason. But yeah, obviously it did not happen. I just played natural knight d5. A pawn started pushing. Since the square of the pawn is becoming smaller and smaller, my king has to enter the square in order to be able to catch the pawn. If I do that, he takes my pawn with another check with the fork to this one, so I'm only on e3 square. And yeah, at this point I knew I was rather hopeless, so I played king d3, inviting him to transpose into the pawn endgame, which he did happily. Knight b4 check, takes, and this is what we call the outside passer, right? And apparently he has two of those, which should guarantee him a win, because when my king is, busy with taking those pawns, this king will go towards mine, and yes, I will take both of those, but then within the next three moves, all my free pawns will be lost. So it's a common theme that I am, teaching quite often to my students. Nevertheless, I kind of allow that because I remember that in one of my classical games, in a very similar scenario, there was some exception that such a pawn did not guarantee my opponent a win, and I could have, let's say, drawn the game. The difference is though that it was with the c pawn, not b pawn, and the other one is that it was only one pawn. In here there are two. So yeah, I'm obviously losing. I've played out some more moves, but it was just to kill some time, pass the time, and so on. And yeah, at this point I finally relined the game. And what can I tell you guys? Pretty complex game. I was happy with my decision making during it. I faced some problems in the opening phase. I got out of the opening without the advantage. I fought for it in the middle game. Even with little time, I was trying to make something happen. So I cannot complain as much. Then this beautiful trick of queen takes c2, rook c2 happened. I couldn't do much afterwards. So should I blame myself for not seeing that trick? Maybe yes, maybe no. The point is that a loss is a loss, and what's more painful than the result itself is the fact that since I've played, let's say, on paper, lower rated opponent, I knew that after this loss I will be getting another one lower rated, and then perhaps even with a win, another one. So this was, let's say, more worrying for me, because from the chess standpoint, I was not so unhappy with myself. So 2 out of 5, dropping the rating at that point of the tournament, and desperately needing to win a game in the next round. Will I manage to do it? You will have to see tomorrow in the next episode. As for this one, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this, please remember to leave a like. I will spoil it to you guys that there are still some Roy Lopez coming on from this tournament. And yeah, at this point I would like to thank you all for watching. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.